Hey guys, tonight we're stepping quietly behind the heavy carved doors of the Ottoman Imperial Harem, a place few in history ever saw, but many whispered about. Hidden within the walls of Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, this world is at once beautiful and confining, refined and rigid. And tonight, you're going to live one day in the life of a concubine, not just the myths, not just the silks and jewels, but the reality, the whispers, the rules, the dreams behind coal-lined eyes. You probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes there without breaking some unspoken code, and honestly, neither would I. Before we begin tonight's journey through history, I have a small favor to ask. If you're enjoying this peaceful corner of the past, please consider giving the video a like or subscribing to the channel so you won't miss any of our upcoming nighttime adventures. It truly helps this little channel grow, and it means so much to me. If you're still awake enough to type a few words, I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. I find it so heartwarming to see history gently unfolding across time zones, quietly shared together. I sincerely hope this historical story is gentle enough to ease you into sleep. But there's always a small risk. It might be too interesting. And if you do happen to stay awake through the whole thing, at least you'll walk away with a bit of new knowledge. And if that's what keeps you up tonight, well, I'd say that's worth it. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink awake beneath a canopy of pale linen. It's cool against your skin, but the light spilling through the mashrabia lattice screens is already warm. It's dawn, and the sounds of the palace stir like soft rustling in a deep forest. You lie still for a moment, listening to the muffled steps of servants padding down long corridors, and the delicate clink of ceramic cups being arranged for tea in some distant kitchen. This is the harem, not the fantasy version people imagine, not the paintings with lounging women and grapes, but the real, functioning, breathing world inside Topkapi Palace. A place where power is invisible but constant, where ambition hides behind every polite smile, and where every woman wakes up wondering what kind of day this will be. Your sleeping quarters are simple but carefully arranged. A small copper mirror sits on a low table beside a jar of rose water. A silver comb lies atop a folded sash. The mattress is firm, but layered with embroidered cushions that smell faintly of lavender and cedar. You stretch slowly, trying not to disturb the other girl still asleep beside you. She's only been here a few weeks, brought in from the Black Sea coast, they say. Still too shy to speak much, but her eyes always look like they're searching for an exit no one dares to mention. Outside your room, the corridors are lined with narrow rugs and cool stone underfoot. You move quietly, as all concubines do. Loudness draws attention. Attention, you've learned, is a double-edged blade. You step into the central hall where soft morning light filters in from high windows. A few women are already gathered, murmuring greetings, sipping warm milk. The older ones speak in half whispers, always watching. A woman named Layla offers you a smile. She's been here for years and somehow still walks like she's free. No one knows why she hasn't aged out of favor. Some say it's because she can read Persian poetry aloud with a voice that makes even the eunuchs pause. As you approach the main doorway, the harem stewardess, tall, graceful, and unreadable, nods once. She doesn't need to speak. You know the routine. The day begins in the hammam, the palace baths. The heat is a gentle shock. You step out of your shift and into the swirling mist where marble gleams like wet silk. The air smells of jasmine oil and orange peel. Your skin glows beneath the rising steam as attendants pour bowls of warm water over your shoulders. There's an order to everything in the bath. Seniority decides who gets the inner pools. You are not yet senior, so you wait. You sit on a warm stone bench beside another girl, both of you too tired to speak, too wary to say anything that might carry beyond the tile. Steam is sacred here. It softens secrets. You once overheard two women whispering about a former concubine who dared to speak out against the Valid Sultan. She vanished before the next dawn. Historians still argue whether such disappearances were real or just stories told to keep everyone obedient. When the bathing ends, you're wrapped in fine linen and scented with rose water. Your skin feels impossibly smooth. Your feet are clean, but you still feel the weight of the day gathering like water at your ankles. Breakfast is quiet, warm flatbread, a smear of goat cheese, a single date. That's it. The rich meals are for the Sultan and his outer court. You eat to nourish, not to indulge. You glance up and catch the gaze of one of the eunuchs stationed by the archway. He doesn't speak. His presence alone is a reminder that you are always seen, never alone, never unobserved. The harem isn't a prison made of iron bars. It's made of eyes. Later, you return to your chamber and carefully arrange your scarf. You don't wear it tightly, just enough to frame your face in the flattering way one of the elder girls taught you. Everything in the harem is strategy, the angle of your head when you listen, the way you fold your hands when you're not speaking, the way you breathe without sounding like you expect to be noticed. Because sometimes, you are. And sometimes, that's when everything changes. You leave your room with your scarf perfectly in place, your footsteps silent on the stone floor. The morning light in the corridor has shifted, growing brighter now, catching motes of dust as they float lazily in the still air. You can already hear the soft rustle of silk slippers and low voices ahead. The first lesson of the day is about to begin. You follow the others down a long hallway, where the ceiling arches like a slow wave and tiny glass lamps swing gently overhead. One of the eunuchs stands at the end, his expression unreadable. He doesn't speak, but with a tilt of his head, you know where to go. You pass beneath an elaborately carved archway into the instruction room, part classroom, part salon, part theater. You take your place on one of the embroidered cushions arranged in a semicircle around the tutor's dais. The other girls settle in beside you. The older ones sit a little straighter, already fluent in what matters. The younger ones, like the girl with the golden brown eyes from Anatolia, still look slightly dazed, trying to understand why learning poetry and grammar might save their lives. Your teacher today is a stern woman named Fatma Hanum. She enters the room without looking at anyone, her hands filled with scrolls and a small wooden box of polished stones for counting meter and verse. Her voice, however, is soft, purposefully so. You lean in to hear her words, which is exactly what she wants. Today, she says, unrolling a thin piece of parchment, we continue with the ghazal form. Who remembers the rhyme structure? No one speaks for a beat too long. Then Layla, always composed, recites the pattern perfectly. A faint nod from the teacher. She moves on without praise. Here, attention is its own kind of currency. Too much, and the room turns cold. You spend the next hour unraveling poetic couplets. Your tongue fumbles over the sounds of Persian, which must be pronounced just so, each syllable sliding smoothly, like pouring water from a fine-spouted jug. You're corrected more than once, but never shamed, just marked, silently, in Fatma's memory. After poetry comes recitation. A visiting mullah from the palace mosque enters with quiet dignity, and the air in the room changes immediately. You straighten your posture. Today's verse is from Surah Maryam. You take your turn reading, your voice low but steady, hoping your pronunciation will be acceptable. The mullah gives you a brief glance, not approval, but not disapproval either. Next comes music. The lesson shifts into a smaller chamber, where the girls take out their instruments. You reach for your oud. It still smells faintly of cedar and beeswax. The strings are slightly loose, so you tune them carefully, listening for that exact, vibrating pitch. Across the room, someone is practicing a melody from the Hejaz, soft and sorrowful, like a bird trapped behind a window. You've grown to love these quiet, structured mornings. They are predictable, which in the harem means they are safe. When you are singing, or carefully copying a line of calligraphy, no one is watching you for the wrong reasons. But even here, in the most refined of settings, the hierarchy is always present. There's a girl near the window named Aish. She's recently been moved to a different chamber, closer to the Sultan's wing. Her ode is newer than yours. Her robe is lined in brocade. She sits in the front row now, and when she plays, the tutor listens more closely. You try not to mind, but it's hard not to notice the quiet shift of power. After music, you're given a short break. You drift into the colonnade that borders the harem courtyard. The marble columns cool against your fingertips. The sun hits the tiles just right now, making the whole world feel glazed in gold. Layla joins you, folding herself gracefully onto the bench beside you. She's holding a peeled fig in one hand, eating it slowly with deliberate care. "She's clever," Layla says without looking at you. She knew exactly when to cry and when to laugh. You smile faintly but say nothing. "She's not the first," Layla adds, wiping her fingers on a silk cloth. "And she won't be the last. It's a long game, you know." You nod. The thing about the harem is that no one ever says too much, but they say just enough. As the sun climbs higher, you're summoned to the seamstress quarters. There's no rest between lessons and duties. You're expected to learn the art of refinement from every angle. Today, your task is to help sort through bolts of fabric recently delivered from Bursa. Silks in deep plum, watery blue, and a shade of green that looks like new olives. You run your fingers across the textures, learning to tell by touch which will crease and which will float. The chief seamstress assigns each of you a strip to embroider. Tiny gold thread, nearly invisible, has to be worked into the fabric without warping the shape. Your stitches are small but not perfectly even. She frowns but lets you continue. Behind you, two other girls are whispering about what you can't quite tell. You catch your name once, and Aishi's. You pretend not to hear. When the embroidery is done, your eyes are sore. The sun has shifted again. Time in the harem doesn't pass in hours. It passes in light angles and mealtime bells and the weight of what you haven't said aloud. You return to your chamber briefly, placing the finished fabric beside your cot. The girl from the Black Sea is still gone, probably in her own lesson now. You allow yourself a moment to lie down, just long enough to close your eyes. You don't sleep. You wouldn't dare. but you let your body remember what stillness feels like, because soon it will be time to appear again, not for lessons, not for chores, but for the next test, the one that comes with eyes watching you not for what you know, but for what you are. Historians still argue whether the education in the harem was truly empowering or merely another layer of performance. But you know this much. Here, knowing things means survival. And today, you've survived the morning. You rise from the cot as the light shifts again, now slanting in through the carved screens with a deeper warmth. The quiet of midday has a peculiar kind of tension in the harem, not because it is loud, but because it is hushed in a different way. Less learning, more watching. You adjust your sash before stepping back into the corridor. The air is heavy with the scent of musk and boiled cloves. Someone nearby is preparing perfumes. But that's not where you're headed. Today, you've been summoned to the corridor near the Gate of Felicity. The walk there is deliberate. The deeper into the palace you go, the smoother the tiles, the more polished the silence. You keep your eyes down, not out of fear, but because you know better than to invite speculation. Attention is currency, and the most expensive kind of attention comes from those with power. At the corner, you pass one of the eunuchs, not the younger ones who still carry a trace of uncertainty in their eyes, but one of the elders. His skin is dark as night, his robes pristine white, and his gaze flickers over you like a breeze barely touching the skin. He makes no sound. You lower your head in greeting, then keep walking. The black eunuchs run this part of the palace. They are not simply guards. They are gatekeepers to power, to rooms where no other men are permitted, to secrets not even the sultan's viziers dare repeat. Their loyalty is legendary, their memory long, and their control over the harem is absolute. You arrive at the appointed chamber and wait outside, hands folded just so. Inside, a stewardess is speaking with another girl, someone higher ranking. You can't hear the words, but you catch the tone, low, measured, serious. Eventually, the door opens, and you're called in. The room is small but ornate, its walls covered in tiles the color of peacock feathers. A copper brazier smolders in the corner, releasing thin trails of smoke that curl into the painted ceiling like secret thoughts. The stewardess hands you a tray, silver, simple but weighty. On it, a folded kerchief, a ring of polished agate, and a sealed letter. You don't ask questions. You simply nod, bow slightly, and leave as quietly as you came. Delivering items between the private rooms of the harem is not glamorous work, but it's a test. Can you follow instructions without hesitation? Can you remain unnoticed and unremarkable in the act of carrying something that might change everything? You bring the tray to one of the small rooms just off the Sultan's private garden. A woman answers the door. She's not a concubine. She's older, perhaps in her 40s, with calm, intelligent eyes and a mouth that never smiles unless she means it. She accepts the tray, glances once at the ring, then closes the door without a word. You return the empty tray to the stewardess. She gives you no acknowledgement, but as you turn to leave, her hand gently brushes your sleeve, barely noticeable. It is the closest thing to praise you'll get today. You walk slowly now. The air outside the chamber feels lighter, and for a brief moment, so do you. That's how it works here. One gesture, one task done correctly, and your name rises in whispers. One wrong move, and you vanish. You head toward the central courtyard, the heart of the harem. It's a garden shaped like a square, with a small fountain in the middle and raised paths lined with cypress trees. From afar, it looks peaceful, but in truth, it's a stage. A few girls are already out walking in pairs, arms lightly linked, eyes flicking over one another as they talk about nothing. You find a space beneath a flowering vine and sit on the low stone wall, letting the sun fall across your lap. You are being watched, not by any one person, but by the harem itself. The way you hold yourself, the way you respond. Everything is a message. Then, a figure approaches, the Valide Sultan. You rise immediately, lowering your gaze. The other girls do the same. She walks slowly, attended by two women and a eunuch trailing behind her. Her robes shimmer with deep burgundy and gold thread. Her presence changes the temperature of the air. She says nothing as she passes. She doesn't have to. She looks directly at you for half a second. And in that moment, you are suspended, frozen in her shadow. And then, she moves on. You sit back down slowly, aware now that your heart is beating faster than before. The Valide Sultan is the most powerful woman in the empire, mother to the Sultan, ruler of the harem, and often the real strategist behind imperial decisions. Her favor can elevate you beyond imagination. Her displeasure can end your story before it even begins. Later in the afternoon, you're summoned again, this time to the perfumery. The air is thick with rosewater, cardamom, myrrh. Glass vials are arranged on trays like tiny soldiers. The head perfumer, a silent woman named Munira, gestures for you to assist her. You hold a strip of linen as she dips it into a mixture and waves it before her nose. Then yours. It smells of orange blossom and something else, something smoky, almost bitter. Too strong, she murmurs. You mix new oils, drop by drop, the balance delicate. You're told to memorize which scents are considered dignified, which are too bold, which are forbidden near the Sultan. It's a whole language, unspoken but understood. As you cork a small bottle, you catch a reflection of yourself in the polished metal tray beneath it. You look the same, and yet different, more careful, more composed. Your shoulders no longer slope forward like a girl trying to disappear. Historians still argue whether the harem was a prison or a finishing school for the powerful. Whether its women were prisoners or quiet architects of the empire's future. Standing there, surrounded by scents as layered as court intrigue, you wonder if it can be both. The sun begins to fall, shadows stretching across the floors like long silken veils. You're allowed to return to your room now, and you walk slowly, your fingers still scented with musk and fig leaf. Outside your chamber, the corridor is quiet again, the hush of twilight creeping in. Inside, the other girl has returned. She's asleep now, curled like a cat beneath the covers. You lower yourself beside her and stare up at the wooden ceiling, carved with stars. The day is not over, not yet. But this moment, this brief exhale before night's uncertainty, feels like your own. You don't sleep, not yet. The low hum of the palace at dusk is soft, but not silent. The distant clatter of serving trays, the faint scrape of sandals against tile, and somewhere far off, a musician plucking the first few notes of an evening song. You lie still, listening, allowing your breath to settle into the rhythm of the hour. In the harem, even the quiet has a particular tone, and right now, it carries anticipation. Eventually, there's a knock at the door, not loud. Just one, quick tap. That's the signal for the evening lesson, language and song. You rise, gently smoothing your sash, and give a quick glance toward your roommate. She's still sleeping, her face half hidden beneath her arm. She'll join the later session, perhaps, or perhaps she won't be summoned at all. You don't ask why. You never ask why. The walk to the lesson chamber takes you through the library corridor, a long, curved passage lined with niches full of books, scrolls, and ledgers. The shelves are so old that parts of them have bowed under the weight of time. Here, history is held in bindings of leather and silk, the margins filled with calligraphy so delicate you almost don't see the ink at all unless you lean close. Tonight's tutor is a man. Not common, but not unheard of either. He's one of the court linguists, brought in from Damascus, narrow of face, serious of tone, and dressed in a robe the color of dusk. He waits at the head of the room, a wooden board beside him covered in Arabic script. You take your place on the cushions. Around you, the room fills slowly with other women, each settling into the same familiar posture, legs folded beneath, hands resting lightly in the lap, eyes forward. There's a subtle choreography to it, learned over years of watching and mimicking. The lesson begins with vocabulary, words you already know, but the tone is new, formal, almost theatrical. The tutor asks each of you to speak aloud, one by one. When it's your turn, you pronounce each syllable carefully, shaping the consonants with the tip of your tongue. He listens, nods once, moves on, then comes song. You are handed a slim scroll containing the lyrics of an old Ottoman melody, one said to have been sung by a concubine who once won the heart of a sultan. No one knows if it's true, but the song has survived, and here, that counts for something. The melody is minor, haunting but soft. When you sing it, the room changes, not dramatically, just the faintest shift, like silk shifting over marble. You don't know if the tutor notices, but Layla does. She always does. She doesn't smile, but you can tell by the way she blinks, slowly, deliberately, that she's filing this moment away. You finish the lesson just after the evening call to prayer echoes through the palace. The sound reaches even the deepest parts of the harem, carried on the breeze like a ribbon. You and the others pause, some whispering a prayer under their breath. Others simply listen, eyes closed, letting the familiar cadence settle into the corners of the room. Leaving the lesson, you turn instead of returning to your chamber. You head toward the east wing, the long corridor that overlooks the inner courtyard. Here, the windows are small, but if you press close, you can see the Sultan's private garden. It's quiet there. You stop beside one of the latticework screens and peer through. The moon is just beginning to rise, pale and slow, above the trees. You can see the edge of the marble fountain, the faint glow of lanterns strung along the path. And then, a figure. You can't tell who it is, just the outline of a robe, a slow, deliberate movement through the garden. Not the Sultan. His robes are darker, and his walk has a certain weight. This one is more careful, intentional. You stay for only a few heartbeats longer. To linger would be unwise. You've already taken a risk by coming this far. As you return to your room, the halls seem thinner somehow, not emptier, just stretched, like time itself has pulled a little longer to make room for what's to come. Inside, the girl from the Black Sea is awake now, sitting up, her hair braided loosely over one shoulder. She looks at you as you enter, not with fear, but with a kind of mute curiosity, like she's trying to calculate how far ahead of her you are in this unspoken game. You sit across from her and begin brushing out your own hair. The silence between you isn't uncomfortable, just part of the routine. And then, the knock, not the soft tap from earlier. This one is firmer, twice. Your heart stills. The girl's eyes widen, but neither of you speaks. You rise, almost without thinking. Your hand adjusts your sash again, this time without meaning to. Outside the door stands one of the eunuchs, young, unsmiling. He gestures for you to follow. You bow slightly to the girl, though neither of you knows why. It's not protocol, it's just instinct. You walk behind the eunuch through a part of the harem you rarely enter, toward the sultan's private reception area. Not his chambers, not yet. This is the staging ground, the place where decisions are made. The hallway is quiet, draped in heavy curtains and lit with oil lamps whose flames barely move. You can feel the heat against your cheeks. He stops outside a carved door. You wait. You don't know what's coming. A conversation, a test, a dismissal, but the door never opens. Instead, the eunuch turns to you and says, for the first time in your memory, a single word. Wait. And so you do. You stand in that corridor, the silk of your robe brushing your ankles, the air filled with the scent of pomegranate wood and old incense. You listen to the silence behind the door, and you wait. Historians still argue whether a concubine's rise depended more on timing or talent. But here, in this narrow stretch of hallway, all you know is this. Sometimes, the waiting is the real test. You wait longer than you thought possible. Minutes pass, maybe more. The corridor remains still, lit by a single wall lamp, whose flame sways slightly with every unseen draft. You try not to fidget, but your fingers twitch against the folds of your robe, your eyes tracing the outline of the carved door in front of you again and again. The silence isn't just heavy, it's curated, intentional, every moment designed to make you feel smaller, less certain, to make the summons itself a form of judgment. Eventually, the door opens, but it's not what you expect. No lavish chamber, no sultan waiting behind a silk curtain. Just another eunuch, older this time, robes darker, face unreadable. He steps out, glances once at you, then speaks softly to the first eunuch in a dialect you barely recognize. A few clipped syllables, a decision made without you, then return to your chamber. That's all. No explanation, no glance, just that. You lower your head in obedience, turn, and begin the walk back. Your feet know the way, but your thoughts don't follow. They circle, tight and fast, like birds trapped in a dome. What did it mean? Why were you brought that far, only to be turned away? Behind you, the corridor shrinks with every step. You feel not quite dismissed, but not quite remembered either. A dangerous space to linger in. Back in your chamber, the girl is pretending to sleep again. But you see the tension in her shoulders. She heard the knock. She counted the time. She knows you came back unchosen. You don't say anything. You just sit, slowly, and begin removing your earrings one by one, placing them on the low tray beside your cushion. The sound is soft, final. The truth is, no one tells you the rules of favor. They're not written down. They're not whispered between lessons. They live in glances, in the way a stewardess lingers near one girl more than another, in how many steps it takes to be summoned, and how many more to actually be seen. And tonight, you were not seen. You lie back, fully clothed, eyes open. The ceiling doesn't answer you. It never does. By morning, no one will speak of it. The harem breathes differently in the wake of these non-events, a shared understanding that silence is safer than curiosity. The next day begins without ceremony. No one mentions your name, no one asks questions. That's the way it works here. You dress simply, avoiding colors that attract notice. Today, the duties are in the textile wing, where the day's silks are sorted and prepared for future garments. You're assigned to measure bolts of damask. The fabric is cool beneath your fingertips, patterned with gold threads that catch the morning light in sharp lines. Across from you, another girl coughs once, a dry sound. She keeps working. No one stops. The seamstress in chief, a woman named Bahar, checks your measurements, correcting a half-centimeter without looking up. Precision, she says, almost absently, is the difference between favor and forgetting. You nod, but she's already moved on. By midday, your hands ache. The fine threads demand soft pressure and endless repetition. The scent of lavender sachets and starched cotton clings to everything. You're permitted a break. You wander to the outer balcony of the textile hall, where the breeze from the Bosphorus can sometimes be felt if the air is still enough. Today, it is. You inhale slowly, letting the salt and wind fill your lungs. It smells nothing like the harem, which is to say, it smells like somewhere else. Layla appears beside you without a sound. So, she asks, after a long pause. You don't answer, not directly. They told me to return. You say finally. She nods, almost like she expected it. That's not no, she says. It's maybe later. You watch the ships on the water, tiny from this high. You wonder where they're going. It's better, sometimes, she adds, to wait, to be overlooked. You look at her. She smiles, but not in pity, in experience. Did you ever? You hesitate, but she answers before you finish. Once, a long time ago, I stood in the same hallway you did, waited in the same silence. And, she shrugs, someone else went through the door. And yet, she gestures around her, vaguely. I'm still here. The conversation ends as easily as it began. She leaves. You stay a moment longer. Later that day, during stitching practice, a young concubine cuts her finger. Not badly, just enough to stain the fabric. She gasps. Everyone looks. A stewardess appears within seconds, as if summoned by blood itself. The girl is taken away. The bloodied cloth is removed. No one says her name again. You realize, in that moment, just how thin the line is between attention and erasure. When you return to your chamber that evening, the girl from the Black Sea is gone. Not permanently. She's simply been reassigned. A note on your pillow informs you that you now have the chamber to yourself. This is a signal, a small one, but unmistakable. It means someone, somewhere, has remembered your name. You take a moment to look at the empty cushion across the room. Then, you begin to braid your hair for evening prayers. Historians still argue whether the women of the harem were pawns or players in a larger game, whether they shaped power from behind the veil or merely survived its shadows. But tonight, as you kneel beside the flickering candle and whisper your own prayer into the stillness, you feel something stir inside you. You were not chosen, but you are not invisible. And in the harem, that is more than most can say. The following morning begins with the sound of sweeping, somewhere just outside your chamber. One of the younger attendants is brushing the floor with short, stiff strokes. You hear the bristles scrape across stone, methodical and careful. There's something calming about it, that small act of order before the palace opens its eyes. You sit up slowly. The air is cool. A breeze curls through the lattice screen, carrying the smell of boiled barley and something faintly floral. Maybe jasmine oil? The light is gentler today. Or maybe you're just slower to meet it. No one knocks, no summons comes, and yet you dress anyway. That's the way it works here. Routine is survival. You slip into a deep blue robe with narrow embroidery along the cuffs, modest, respectful, and just elegant enough to suggest you haven't given up. You wrap your sash once, then a second time, knotting it like Layla taught you, firm, but not too tight. As you step into the corridor, you realize how different it feels to move alone now. Without a roommate, your rhythm belongs solely to you. Each footfall is your own. There is silence behind you and space ahead. In the harem, both are luxuries. You're assigned to the fragrance room again today. The door creaks slightly as you enter, and the air is already rich. Rose, sandalwood, myrrh. Dozens of glass bottles glint on their trays, arranged like jewels in a sultan's crown. Munira, the head perfumer, gives you a glance, then returns to her vials. She's seated on a low stool, rolling thin strips of linen between her fingers, testing the absorption of a new blend. Orange blossom and clove today, she says without preamble. We're preparing for the Valid Sultan's private prayer ceremony. You nod and move to the workbench. The ingredients are already measured. A spoon of dried blossom, a pinch of crushed clove, a vial of base oil. You begin to mix, gently warming the blend until it softens, releases. There is a rhythm to it, one you've come to enjoy. Mix, swirl, steep, strain. In this room, no one watches with suspicion. Here, your usefulness is precise, tangible. You create something that will linger on someone else's wrist, on the fabric of a prayer robe, on the cushion of a throne. At one point, Munira speaks again, her voice nearly lost in the perfumed air. You have a steady hand, she says. It's a small thing, but in the harem, small things matter. You bottle the mixture carefully, pressing a wax seal over the top with a brass stamp. As you press down, the sigil of the palace leaves its mark. A tulip, delicate but sharp-edged. You feel the wax yield beneath your fingers. It's satisfying, quietly powerful. Later, after the bottles have been delivered, you step out into the southern courtyard. A few others are there already, gathering herbs in the garden or carrying linens to dry. The sun is high, but not harsh. The marble pavers beneath your feet still hold the coolness of morning. You walk a slow loop beneath the pomegranate trees, their blossoms bright against the palace stone. The branches arch like painted ceilings, heavy with promise, but not yet fruiting. A stewardess passes by and glances your way. She says nothing, but you see her hesitate for half a second, as if almost about to speak. Then she continues. Again, a signal. Nothing direct, but enough. That afternoon, your duties shift. You're called to assist in the preparation of ceremonial robes, silks embroidered with Quranic verses and floral motifs so fine they seem to shimmer when they catch the light. You're assigned to the detailing station, helping to sew tiny freshwater pearls into the edge of a sash. The other girls at the table are older, One of them, a sharp-eyed woman named Halime, watches you stitch, then clicks her tongue when your needle lands just a hair off center. Straight line, she murmurs. Even when the thread isn't, you correct it. She nods. Approval, in her language, is rare but honest. While you work, the room hums with low conversation. One girl is quietly reciting verses. Another hums an old lullaby from her province, something about birds that never land. You don't join in, but you listen. It's the kind of sound that doesn't require participation, just presence. By early evening, the robe is complete. You help fold it carefully into a cedar-lined chest, sealing it with a strip of cloth and a golden pin. The pin is shaped like a rosebud, still closed. You wonder, briefly, what it means. You return to your chamber just as the sky begins to dim. A pinkish glow paints the floor as you step inside. The room still smells faintly of jasmine and warmth, and for the first time in a while, it doesn't feel empty. It feels earned. You wash your hands in the small copper basin, then light the tiny oil lamp by your bedside. The flame flickers, reflecting on the brass tray where your comb and scarf rest. You sit slowly and breathe in the quiet, and then the voice. It's soft, just outside your door. A stewardess. You recognize her tone. Prepare for the Valide Sultan. Not an invitation, not a test, an instruction. You stand, your heart doesn't race, not like it used to. You know now how to dress for this. A soft robe, no jewelry, hair braided low and neat. You choose a pair of embroidered slippers, nothing loud. As you follow the stewardess down the hall, you notice how the others glance without turning their heads. A flicker of awareness in their posture. This is how rumors start. Not with words, but with movement. You're led through a side door into a quieter part of the palace. The Valide Sultan's reception room is more restrained than you imagined, not gilded, but purposeful. Calligraphy scrolls hang from the walls, verses in gold ink on indigo silk. A brazier burns sandalwood, and the air is warm with wisdom. She is seated on a raised divan, her posture regal but not rigid. She is older now, age woven into her face like fine lines in silk. But her eyes are sharp, too sharp for comfort. You kneel, bow, wait. She doesn't speak for a long moment. When she does, her voice is low and even. You were summoned yesterday. You nod, head still lowered. You returned. Another pause. You were patient. A longer pause still. Then, we will see. That's it. No more, no less. You are dismissed with a slight wave. As you rise and leave, your feet feel lighter. Not triumphant, but grounded. Historians still argue whether the Valide Sultan chose her favorites based on strategy, instinct, or something else entirely. But as you step back into the corridor, the scent of sandalwood clinging to your robe, you realize something important. In this world, even being seen is a kind of victory. You don't tell anyone about the meeting. By the time you return to your chamber, the moon has slipped higher, and the soft rustle of sleep is settling across the harem. A few lanterns flicker in distant corridors, throwing wobbly shadows across the stone. You slip inside quietly, close the door, and sit on the edge of your cushion without even removing your slippers. The words, "We will see," echo like a soft drumbeat in your mind. Neither praise nor warning, but something in between, a possibility suspended in silk. You've learned by now not to search for meaning too quickly. Meaning in the harem often arrives dressed as something else. The next morning, You are assigned to the Hall of Adornment, a narrow room tucked near the harem's inner quarters, where combs, cosmetics, oils, and robes are kept in perfect rows. The other girls here are older, quieter. Their hands move with practiced efficiency, curling locks of hair with hot tongs, dabbing coal into small porcelain bowls, steeping dried flower petals in oil until they yield their fragrance. You're given a simple task: refill the pots of surma, a powdered antimony used to line the eyes. You measure carefully, remembering Munira's lesson. Too coarse and it irritates, too fine and it won't hold. As you work, one of the senior concubines enters the room. You recognize her instantly. Her name is Yasmin. Everyone knows her name, though no one says it loudly. She's been favored by the Sultan for nearly a year, an eternity by harem standards. She moves without hesitation, as if the room adjusts around her. She doesn't speak to anyone, but she watches. Her eyes linger on the fabrics, the perfume trays, the mirror with its delicate filigree frame. Then they land on you. She says nothing, just a slow, thoughtful blink. Not unfriendly, but not quite neutral either. A measured acknowledgement. You keep your head down and finish your task. Later that day, during meal service, you notice your bowl contains a sliver of honey-soaked fig, a small treat, rare and unrequested. No one else at your table receives one. No one says anything about it, but Layla looks at your bowl, then looks at you. She doesn't smile, she just nods once. Another signal. You eat the fig slowly, letting the syrup coat your tongue. The sweetness is brief, but it stays with you longer than expected. After the meal, you're excused from the usual chores. A stewardess arrives with a soft command. You're to assist in the private wardrobe room. It's a small, locked space where the Sultan's personal garments and those of his guests are kept in impeccable condition. Inside, the air smells of cedar chests and old silk. The walls are lined with cabinets, each labeled in ornate Ottoman script. You're told to inspect a series of caftans for signs of wear, tiny snags, loose threads, or faded dye. You run your fingers gently across the fabric, marveling at the weight of them. These are not like the robes you wear. These are stitched with meaning, woven messages of status, intention, and history. One garment has sleeves so wide and heavy they could only be worn sitting down. Another is embroidered with verses from Rumi's poetry in letters smaller than your pinky nail. You repair a fraying cuff with careful stitches, hidden between seams. Your work is checked, then checked again. No comment is made, but the caftan is folded and placed in the center of the room, a sign that it passed inspection. Historians still argue whether concubines were trained in the arts of seduction or the arts of service, whether their beauty was the primary currency or whether it was something else. The ability to anticipate, to notice, to act without command. You're beginning to suspect the answer is both. That evening, your steps take you toward the inner courtyard again. You've come to prefer this time, just after the second call to prayer, when the sky is streaked with peach and lavender, and the walls glow like painted porcelain. You sit beneath one of the fig trees. Its branches are bare now, but you know in a few months it will burst with fruit. You like that thought, that something waits, quietly, to become more than it is. Layla finds you again. You're being watched, she says without looking at you. You nod, you already know. Careful, she adds, That can be a blessing or a test, or both, you say. She smiles faintly. You're learning. A silence settles between you, companionable but weighted. She brushes her hand across her skirt, then glances up at the stars just beginning to flicker into view. Do you ever think about leaving? You ask, surprising even yourself. Her eyes shift, slowly. No, she says. Then, more softly. Not anymore. She rises, gives you a long look, then disappears back into the shadows. You stay a little longer, watching the sky. That night, a new concubine arrives. You don't see her, but you hear it, the shuffle of foreign shoes, the hushed tones of introductions, the sharp clack of a stewardess's walking stick guiding her to her chamber. The harem absorbs new arrivals like a sponge, silently, thoroughly, without pause. In your room, you light your oil lamp and take out your small mirror. You examine your face as if seeing it for the first time. You aren't more beautiful than the others. That's never been your strength. But your eyes hold something else now. Focus. The kind that doesn't beg to be chosen. The kind that chooses its own moment. You snuff the lamp and lie down, hands folded across your waist, like a figure carved into marble. You're not sure what tomorrow will bring, but tonight you feel neither fear nor longing. Only a strange sort of calm, the kind that comes when the game is no longer foreign. When you've accepted that every glance, every step, every thread you stitch is part of something larger, and when you know, deep in your bones, that to endure quietly is not to disappear, it's to prepare. The morning sun arrives without ceremony, no summons, no footsteps outside your door, only the slow light pouring through the mashrabia screens, casting soft lattice work across the floor. It's a gentle kind of silence, the sort that makes you feel like the palace is holding its breath. You move without being called. You dress in a robe of muted gold, not bright enough to draw envy, but fine enough to remind the room you belong here. You braid your hair loosely, letting a few strands fall near your cheeks. Not careless, calculated softness. You step into the corridor and find the harem unusually quiet. Even the birds that usually chatter near the garden wall seem hushed today. Down the hallway, you catch sight of the new arrival. She's standing just outside the stewardess's quarters, clearly unsure whether to knock. Her robe is too fine for a new girl. Someone gave her silk too early, which means someone has plans for her. Her posture is rigid, her eyes scanning each passing woman like she's measuring herself against a scale she doesn't yet understand. You don't greet her. No one does. Not yet. The harem will decide how to receive her. You continue on, past the bathhouse and the linen chambers, toward the scriptorium. Today, your duty is transcription. Not official documents, those are left to palace scribes, but letters, private ones, dictated by elder concubines or stewardesses to be sent quietly, often anonymously. You sit cross-legged at a low desk, inkpot to your right, fresh parchment before you. The script must be even, Ottoman Turkish curls in flowing ligatures, and you've learned to guide the reed pen as if it were part of your breath. The first letter is brief, a request for a fabric shipment, written under a false name. The second is more personal, a poem, perhaps, or a riddle wrapped in longing. You write each word slowly, carefully, aware that even a misplaced dot can change the meaning. When the ink dries, you dust the parchment with crushed rose petal powder, both to preserve the script and to carry a scent. The reader will notice. You finish your task in silence, then stack the pages beneath a brass weight shaped like a tulip. As you rise to leave, you notice something beneath the edge of the desk, a folded scrap of paper, tucked nearly out of sight. You hesitate, but curiosity, in the harem, is rarely innocent. Still, your fingers reach. You open it slowly. It's not official, not a lesson, just a few lines, written in a hurried, uneven hand. A memory? A note? You can't tell. She wore the red sash, and still they passed her by. So she laughed, and never wore it again. That's all. No name, no date, just that. You fold it back and place it exactly where you found it. By midday, you're back in the fragrance room. Munira is not there today, but a younger perfumer oversees the tasks. She assigns you to inventory. You take stock of oils and powders, measuring weight, checking wax seals. You work steadily, methodically. No part of you moves without intention now. Your fingers carry purpose. Your silence carries weight. A stewardess enters near the end of your shift and hands you a parcel, small, wrapped in plain linen. For the Valide Sultan, she says. Directly, you nod. The trust implied is deliberate. A test again, or something more. You carry the package down the long, curved hallway, where the light falls in columns through narrow, high windows. You've walked this path before. It feels shorter now. The Valide Sultan's chamber is open slightly, just enough for your knock to be heard. You wait until her steward waves you in. She's seated at her desk, unadorned except for a single vase with one fresh tulip, white, nearly translucent. She doesn't look up as you enter. You kneel and offer the parcel on the tray. She unwraps it herself, slowly, as if ritual is more important than result. Inside, a carved mirror, rimmed in ivory, with verses inscribed along the edge in gold leaf. She studies it, not with delight, not with disdain, just calmly. You transcribe the letter that requested this? She asks without looking at you. Yes, you say softly. She sets the mirror aside. You know how to be quiet, she says. You know how to wait. A long silence follows. Are you willing to watch? She asks, more pointed now. You hesitate, just long enough to be noticed. Yes. Finally. She lifts her gaze to you. Her eyes are pale but sharp, like porcelain that's never cracked. There will be a guest tomorrow, she says. A man. You don't react. You will not speak to him. You will serve tea. You will listen. That is all. You nod once. You may go. You bow, rise, and leave. The moment the door closes behind you, your heart catches up. It pounds once, heavy and deep, as if your body just realized what your mind already knew. This is not routine anymore. You don't return to your chamber, not yet. Instead, you step into the garden that wraps around the outer wing. The jasmine vines have begun to bloom, their scent sweet and heady. A breeze carries it like a whisper across the path. You sit on the edge of the stone fountain, tracing a finger along the rim. The water is cool, smooth as silk. You think of the mirror, the inscription, the unseen man, and the question, are you willing to watch? Historians still argue whether the harem's power was visible or invisible, whether its influence lay in direct decisions or the quiet gathering of knowledge. But as you sit beneath the flowering vines, the sun slipping low and golden along the palace walls, you understand something simple and profound. To serve tea is not always to serve. Sometimes it is to witness. And in this place, witnessing may be the most dangerous gift of all. The morning arrives with no warning. You rise before dawn, already dressed in soft gray, neither too plain nor too decorative. The air feels heavier than usual, thick with unsaid things. As you fasten your sash, your fingers linger at the knot a moment longer than necessary. There's a slight tremble in your chest, but your hands are steady. Today, you are not a student, not a servant, not quite a concubine either. Today, you are something in between. A stewardess appears just after first light, her expression unreadable as always. She gives a slight nod. No words. That's all it takes. You follow. The corridors are still dark, lit only by the flicker of oil lamps. Your slippers make no sound. You walk the path you've now memorized. Past the tiled chamber with the green domed ceiling. Past the fountain where petals always float for no known reason. Through the narrow passage that leads to the private audience room. The room is smaller than you imagined. Intimate. Its walls are covered in deep blue Iznik tiles, curling with gold leaf vines. There are only 2 chairs, 1 divan, and a low lacquered table in the center. You're early. You're meant to be. You begin setting the table. First the tea tray, polished copper, freshly wiped. Then 2 cups. Their porcelain so thin you can see the faintest silhouette of your fingers through them. You place a small dish of candied quince between them, not sweet enough to distract, not plain enough to offend. A second stewardess enters with the teapot. She sets it down without speaking, then vanishes. The silence that remains is full of anticipation, like a room waiting to inhale. Then, the Valid Sultan arrives. She does not greet you. She simply sits at the head of the room, her robe flowing like shadowed velvet, and nods for you to stand behind her. You do. Hands folded, eyes soft, ears open. Moments later, the guest is led in. He's tall, draped in a dark caftan with silver trim. Older than the Sultan's usual visitors, but with the kind of presence that doesn't announce itself. It's simply there, like a scent you recognize but can't quite place. He bows deeply to the Valid Sultan, then takes the seat across from her. There is no fanfare, no music, just silence and the sound of warm tea being poured. You serve him first, then her. You step back, and you watch. They speak in low tones, Ottoman Turkish, but clipped and formal, the language of politics wrapped in courtesy. You don't catch every word, but the rhythm tells its own story. Land disputes, a distant province, a shipment delayed, something about a marriage, though the names aren't familiar. You study his face without staring. He has a scar near his ear, nearly hidden by his beard. His fingers drum the table only when he mentions the delay. His one moment of frustration, the Valid Sultan, for her part, never once raises her voice. Her replies are like slow-moving water, calm, sure, and impossibly clear. You refill the tea when her cup nears empty. He nods once, acknowledging you, but not seeing you. That's exactly what you want. You are not here, and yet you are a witness. After nearly an hour, he stands. There is no farewell, just a final glance between them, not hostile, not warm, calculated. He leaves with the stewardess. The room stills. You begin to clear the table, your movements fluid and soundless. You listened well, the Valid Sultan says, not as a question. You pause. Yes. What did you hear? You choose your words carefully. A negotiation that had already been decided before it began. She looks at you then, truly looks. And yet, she says, He still needed to be heard. You say nothing. That seems to be the correct answer. She stands and walks toward the lattice window, where pale sunlight now spills in stripes across the floor. The world beyond these walls believes this place is built on silk and perfume, she murmurs. They think we sit idle, waiting for affection. She turns to face you. But power, she says, is listening. Power is knowing what isn't said. You bow, deeply this time. She nods once. You are dismissed. The corridor outside feels brighter. Not warmer, not yet, but more vivid. You return to the fragrance room, not because you're told to, but because something in you seeks the stillness of glass vials and folded cloth. Munira is back. She doesn't ask where you've been, but she watches you closely as you begin to mix a new batch of scent. Orange blossom and pine resin this time. Sharp, then sweet. You focus on the task with more care than usual. Every drop feels like a thread tying something invisible together. At midday, you pause to eat. Lentils and flatbread again, served with a strip of pickled lemon. The flavors feel clearer somehow, sharper. You eat slowly, deliberately. In the afternoon, Layla finds you in the courtyard. She doesn't sit, just stands beside your bench, folding her arms lightly. Did you see him? She asks. You don't pretend not to understand. Yes. She doesn't press for details. She never does. Instead, she says, you've crossed the veil now. You look at her. And what does that mean? It means, she says, you're no longer unseen, and you won't ever be again. She leaves you with that. Later that evening, in the quiet of your room, you think about her words, about the man, about the tea, about the mirror rimmed in gold. Historians still argue whether the harem was truly isolated from the empire's decisions, whether it was a sanctuary, a gilded prison, or a backroom council chamber hidden in brocade. But you no longer wonder, because now you know. The real empire didn't just live in palaces or battlefields. It lived in rooms like that one, over warm tea, behind careful eyes. Spoken aloud only once, but remembered forever. The following day unfolds with unexpected stillness, not the fragile kind that comes before a storm, nor the brittle hush of anticipation. This is the quiet that follows motion, a soft settling of dust after something unseen has shifted. You feel it in the way the other girls pass you in the corridor without whispering. You see it in the way the stewardess offers a glance that lingers half a second longer than it used to. No one says your name aloud, but everyone knows something has changed. You move carefully through your morning duties, light cleaning in the linens chamber, folding and stacking ivory-colored sheets infused with lavender and soapwort. There's comfort in the repetition, each corner aligned, each fold matching the one before. But the silence isn't the same. Now, it listens back. At midday, you are summoned, not to serve, not to clean, not to study, but to walk. The stewardess says only, "The Valide Sultan requests your presence in the Blue Garden." That alone is rare. You nod and follow, your steps light, robe trailing softly behind you. The Blue Garden isn't visible from any of the harem's common areas. It lies behind a private gate, tucked between the old council quarters and the Sultan's winter pavilion. Most of the concubines never see it. The moment you enter, the name makes sense. Every tile underfoot is a different shade of blue: indigo, lapis, faded turquoise. They catch the light and hold it, like shallow pools frozen in ceramic. Cypress trees rise like sentinels around the perimeter, and in the center, a long, narrow pool reflects the sky so perfectly, it's difficult to know where one ends and the other begins. The Valide Sultan is already seated beneath a stone arch draped in flowering vines. You approach and bow. She motions for you to sit, not kneel, sit. That, too, is a signal. For a time, she says nothing. A tray of fresh cherries rests beside her, the fruit dark and glossy as lacquered wood. She picks one, bites it delicately, and finally speaks. Do you know how old I was when I arrived here? You look up, surprised. No, my lady. 13, she says, fresh off a ship from Circassia. I thought the harem would smell like roses and taste like sugar. She smiles. But it's a memory more bitter than sweet. The truth is, it smelled like mildew and laundry soap. And the first girl I met was crying. She never stopped. You don't speak. You let the words sit. She thought it was her job to be beautiful. The Valide Sultan continues, plucking another cherry. She painted her lips and braided her hair and tried to laugh at the right moments. But beauty fades fast in a place like this. It can't hold you up for long. She tosses the pit into a small silver bowl. I watched, I listened, and I learned that the ones who survive here are not always the loudest. You nod, slowly. Yes, my lady. She looks at you. You served tea without speaking. You listened without asking. And you remembered. She reaches into the folds of her robe and removes a small, flat box. She opens it and holds it out. Inside is a pin, delicate, gold, shaped like a fig leaf. You've seen one before, worn only by senior concubines trusted to serve as attendants in official harem functions. She places it gently in your palm. You will wear this, she says, but not proudly, never proudly. No, my lady. She leans back, her eyes on the pool. The water shifts gently with the breeze. There's talk, she says, her voice quieter now. Whispers in the outer palace. The Sultan is restless. He's speaking more with his viziers than with his wives. He's ignoring Yasmin. You blink. That last detail isn't public knowledge. Not yet. She will notice soon, the Valide Sultan says, and she will not like it. You say nothing. She'll look for someone to blame, someone new, someone who was called to the Blue Garden. A pause. And I need to know, she continues, that you will not give her reason to find you useful. You breathe in, slowly. I understand. Do you? You meet her gaze. Power looks for cracks. I won't give it any. She smiles, just barely. Good, she says. Then you may enjoy the garden for a while. She rises and leaves without another word. Her attendants follow, their footsteps vanishing like ripples on still water. You remain. For a long time. You sit at the edge of the pool, trailing your fingers just above the surface, not touching, only sensing the coolness below. You let the breeze carry the scent of jasmine and fig leaves across your skin. This is the closest thing to peace you've known in weeks. And still, your mind stays sharp. You think of Yasmin, of how long she's held favor, of how quickly that favor can sour. You think of how quiet ambition wears the face of patience, and how easily that face can be misread. Historians still argue over whether the Valide Sultan chose her successors by instinct or by strategy, whether she nurtured protégés or simply tested them until they broke. But here in the Blue Garden, you understand the truth. This place is not just for beauty. It's for watching. And now, you're one of the watchers. You rise at last, slip the fig leaf pin beneath your sash, hidden from view but not from meaning, and walk back through the tiled gate. Your steps echo softly across the blue stones, each one deliberate, each one entirely your own. You return to the harem without a word. The fig leaf pin stays tucked beneath your sash, hidden against the folds of your robe, but you can feel its weight, light, almost nothing, and yet it shifts how you walk, how you carry yourself. You've crossed a threshold, and you know better than to draw attention to it. The other girls sense something. They don't speak to you, but they don't ignore you either. As you pass through the long corridor that leads to the atrium, a few glance in your direction with practiced subtlety. Half a breath too long, a single beat of hesitation in their steps. You return no gaze. That, too, is part of the performance. You spend the afternoon in the bathhouse, not as a privilege, as a responsibility. The senior stewardess, a tall woman named Rukiye, informs you the Sultan's visiting sister will arrive tomorrow. The baths must be prepared. You nod and get to work. You scrub the marble benches, polish the brass basins, stack towels in careful symmetry. The scent of rosewater clings to your sleeves. The heat wraps around your neck and temples, curling damp wisps of hair against your skin. At some point, Layla joins you. She says nothing for a long while, just works beside you in silence, hands moving with graceful efficiency. Finally, as you're arranging bowls of pumice stones, she speaks. I heard you were in the blue garden. You keep your eyes on the bowl. Yes. She gave you the pin? Yes. A long pause. Don't let it show, Layla says. Not unless she tells you to. You nod, but she's already moved on. That night, you dream of fig trees in bloom, heavy with fruit, their branches bending under the weight. In the dream, someone hands you a knife and asks you to choose which ones to harvest and which to leave. When you reach for one, it turns to glass. You wake before dawn. The day begins with a rustle of tension in the air. The Sultan's sister, Haiti's Sultan, is due to arrive just after the second call to prayer. The harem is electric with quiet energy, like a still pond about to ripple. You're assigned to assist in the reception chamber, a role that requires grace, silence, and an understanding of nuance. Your fig leaf pin is still hidden, but the stewardess assigns you without hesitation. Another signal that word has traveled. The room is immaculate, cushions fluffed, incense burning at just the right strength, fruit arranged in concentric circles on silver trays. When she enters, Haiti's Sultan brings the weight of the dynasty with her. She is older than you expected, perhaps in her late 40s, but elegant, with sharp cheekbones and a quiet, amused gaze. Her attendants form a rustling cloud around her, all silk and whispers. You kneel as she passes. She doesn't speak, but her eyes sweep the room. You're sure she notices every detail, the alignment of cups, the temperature of the air, even the softness of the carpet beneath her slippers. You serve her tea with a perfectly measured bow. She accepts it without looking at you. That, oddly, is a compliment. From behind the lattice partition, Yasmin watches. You feel it, a prickle, like heat against the back of your neck. Her presence is a reminder. Favor may be fading, but it is not gone, not yet. When Haiti Sultan departs, the entire room exhales. The stewardess begins collecting trays. You step aside, then pause. Yasmin is still there. She moves toward you with deliberate slowness, like a cat circling a bird it isn't sure it wants to eat. "Careful," she says softly, her voice low enough that only you hear. "That pin shines even when it's hidden." You don't respond. There's nothing to say that wouldn't make things worse. She looks at you a moment longer, then turns and walks away, her robe catching a stray ray of sunlight like a sword in motion. Later, you find Layla in the garden courtyard, near the pomegranate trees. She's kneeling, pruning a plant with a small copper blade. "Yasmin spoke to me," you say. Layla doesn't look up. Of course she did. She knows. She always knows. You sit beside her. What does she do when she feels threatened? Layla trims a leaf with slow precision. She looks for someone who isn't strong enough to fight back. Then she makes them look dangerous. You understand? The warning isn't about now. It's about soon. That evening, you return to your chamber and light the oil lamp. Its glow pools across your cushion, soft and golden. You remove the fig leaf pin and place it inside the hidden pocket of your sash. The power it carries doesn't come from being worn. It comes from being remembered. Historians still argue whether the rivalries in the harem were petty or political, whether women like Yasmin guarded their place out of vanity or necessity. But here, under the flickering light, you know something simpler. Survival isn't about outshining. It's about outlasting, and outlasting requires patience sharper than any dagger. You begin to notice the changes in the smallest of ways. Yasmin no longer passes you in silence. Now, her glances come with edges, polished but pointed. Her voice, once languid and dismissive, tightens when you enter a room, and when she speaks to the stewardesses, she does so just loudly enough for you to hear your name when she thinks you aren't listening. None of it is loud, none of it direct. That would break the unspoken rules. But it is deliberate. You remember what Layla told you. Yasmin doesn't strike immediately. She waits until her target is just visible enough to matter, just vulnerable enough to wound. You, it seems, have become visible. Still, you keep to your tasks. You wake early. Keep your steps light. Speak only when spoken to. You perform your duties in the fragrance room with exacting care. You stitch pearls along the edge of ceremonial robes without fraying a single thread. You refill the rose oil vessels before they're even half empty. You give Yasmin no reason, but you know that in the harem, a lack of wrongdoing is not protection, it's provocation. The test comes 3 days later. It begins as many mornings do, with a whispered assignment and a tray of folded linens. You're told to deliver them to the Sultan's private guest chambers. A simple task, one you've done before. The corridor that leads to those rooms is long and empty, lined with tall wooden doors and glass lanterns. The air smells of lemon soap and freshly waxed floors. You reach the end of the hall, knock once, wait. The steward inside accepts the tray with a polite nod. You bow, turn, and walk back. Except you don't make it far. A voice stops you. Where were you just now? It's Yasmin. She's standing in the corridor behind you, arms folded, flanked by 2 younger concubines who look far too alert for this early in the day. You answer evenly. Delivering linens to the guest quarters. As I was instructed. Her brows lift. Alone? That was the order. Yasmin clicks her tongue once. Strange. No one informed the stewardesses. You keep your tone calm. Rukiye assigned me. If needed, I can retrieve her. A moment passes. Yasmin's face does not change. but her eyes narrow by a fraction. That's when you realize she wasn't expecting you to answer that way. She was hoping you'd stammer, shrink, reveal something to twist, but you didn't. One of the younger girls shifts awkwardly. The moment is slipping. Yasmin knows it. With a smile like polished glass, she says, "Of course, just being thorough." She walks away. The next 2 days are uneventful, unnervingly so. You're sent on minor errands. You fold napkins. You polish trays. You recite verses in the calligraphy room. All of it feels strangely ordinary, as if the air itself is pretending not to know what's coming. Then, late one afternoon, a stewardess comes to your chamber. Her expression is unreadable. The Valid Sultan requests your presence. Immediately, you follow. The walk is quiet. No one else in the halls, just your footsteps and the soft echo of sandals on marble. She receives you not in the blue garden, not in her formal quarters, but in the harem's old music room, a space rarely used now, filled with dust-sleeved instruments and a faint scent of cedar and aging parchment. She's seated on a cushion near the center, a scroll open beside her, one finger resting on the rim of a porcelain tea bowl. You kneel. Wait. "You've caused a problem," she says, not unkindly. You don't respond. I've heard talk, from more than one direction, about impropriety, about overstepping. Still, you wait. She lifts the tea bowl, takes a sip, then sets it down. "Tell me what happened in the guest corridor." You recount it clearly, concisely, no embellishment. When you finish, she nods once. "I believe you," she says. "But that doesn't matter." She lets the silence stretch. "Truth rarely matters here," she continues. "Perception does." You remain still. Yasmin is watching you, others are too, and they're waiting for me to choose. She meets your eyes. "I'm not ready to choose." Your voice is quiet. "Then what would you have me do?" "Be quiet, but not invisible. Work harder, not louder. Be useful, not eager." A pause. "And watch her." You nod. Watch how she handles envy, how she moves when she feels the floor shifting. "Because that," she says, "will tell you everything." She dismisses you with a flick of her hand. You bow, stand, and leave. Back in your chamber, you sit at the edge of your cushion and stare at the wall. The fig leaf pin remains hidden. You don't touch it. You don't need to. Its presence is no longer physical. It's part of your posture now. That evening, you're placed in charge of the evening meal arrangements for the senior concubines, a task normally handled by a woman older, more senior, more politically expendable. You perform it well, quietly, efficiently, no mistakes. But as you pass the final tray, you catch Yasmin watching you from across the room, not speaking, not smiling, just watching. Historians still argue whether the harem's politics resembled a court of queens or a theater of shadows, whether its rivalries were personal or systemic. But you're starting to understand it's both. It's not about who is loudest. It's about who endures the silence longest. And when the silence breaks, who already knows what will be said. The following morning arrives like a held breath. The harem feels unusually tense, like a silk veil stretched too tight. Footsteps echo louder, conversations drop faster when someone enters a room, and laughter, when it happens at all, rings hollow, like bells struck from behind a closed door. You rise early, not from habit, but from necessity. There's no room for hesitation now. You braid your hair with practiced fingers, choose a robe of muted olive with no embroidery, and slide the fig leaf pin into your sash, still hidden, but present. Your first task of the day is in the records chamber, a narrow room lined with scroll racks and low desks, where ledgers are copied, coded, and preserved. The stewardess in charge assigns you to update an inventory list for the royal bath, towels, herbs, soaps. You work quickly, but not too quickly. Accuracy matters more than speed here. Halfway through the list, you feel someone step inside. The air shifts behind you. You turn. It's Yasmin. She glances once at the scroll in front of you, then at the stewardess, then back at you. Is this really the best use of her skills? She asks lightly, directing the question to no one in particular. The stewardess looks up, then back down at her work. It's what she was assigned. Yasmin lets the silence stretch. Her voice remains calm. I've heard she's taken quite an interest in the Valide's schedule lately. You meet her gaze. Only as requested? Her smile sharpens. How obedient. She doesn't wait for a response. She turns and walks out, her robes brushing against the stone floor like a curtain closing behind a stage. Later, in the midday meal hall, her words return. Whispers begin to circulate, not loud, not confirmed, just soft questions pass like folded notes. Was she alone with the Valide Sultan again? Did she really enter the garden unescorted? Is she aiming to replace Yasmin? You don't answer. You let the questions hang. If you deny them, they'll chase you. If you acknowledge them, they'll grow. So you eat your lentils, sip your water, and leave before dessert. In the afternoon, you're called to the Blue Garden. Again, no warning, no explanation. You arrive to find the Valide Sultan seated beneath the fig trees, her hands wrapped around a porcelain tea bowl. She doesn't look at you right away. When she speaks, her voice is quieter than usual. You've made it this far because you listened, because you were careful. You nod, waiting, but that will only carry you so far. At some point, you will be challenged directly. You don't need to ask by whom. She's already begun, you say. Yes, the Valide replies, but not fully, not yet. That's her mistake. She assumes you'll play the same game she does. And I won't? No, she says, meeting your eyes. Because you're not trying to win. You consider that. Should I be? She sets down the bowl. No one wins the harem. You simply last longer than the others. She gestures to the pool, where a single petal floats along the surface. Do you know what I did when I first realized someone was trying to replace me? You shake your head. I gave her what she wanted, a promotion, more responsibility, more visibility. You understand, the higher someone stands, the easier it is to watch them fall. She continues, you can't control what others say about you, but you can decide when to be seen and when to vanish. You bow your head slightly. I'm listening. That evening, as the sun slips behind the walls of Topkapi, the harem fills with the faint scent of orange blossom. Dinner is served earlier than usual. The women gather in clusters, not in joy, but in calculation. You pass through the halls slowly. You make no effort to speak, but you don't hide either. You allow your presence to be noted, just enough to spark more whispering. Layla finds you outside the perfumery, where the lanterns sway slightly in the breeze. She's planning something, she says simply. You nod. I know. She'll come through someone else. Not directly. That's her way. I'm ready. No, Layla says. You're not. But you're getting there. She slips a folded scrap of parchment into your hand. Read this, burn it, then decide. You return to your room and unfold the note. The writing is tight, fast, clearly not meant for anyone outside a tight circle to see. It's a forged order, assigning you to serve in the Sultan's quarters, unaccompanied, unauthorized, unprotected. You stare at it. The ink still smells fresh. A trap. If you follow it, you'll be accused. If you refuse, you'll appear defiant. And just like that, the silence breaks. Historians still argue whether rivalries within the harem were born from love or power, jealousy or survival. But here, in this small, flickering room, you realize it doesn't matter. The outcome is the same. You tear the parchment into strips, feed them one by one to the oil lamp's flame, and watch each edge curl into ash. Then, you rise and wait for the next move. The morning after the forgery burns to ash, the palace feels different. You notice it first in the quiet, not the soft calm of routine, but the watchful silence of a place holding its breath. Conversations pause when you pass. Doors close just before you reach them. The laughter in the bathing chambers is forced now, stilted. You do not speak of the note. You do not accuse. You do not explain. You simply go about your tasks, because you know something that Yasmin does not. You don't need to clear your name. You only need to outlast the story. Mid-morning, you are sent to assist in the kitchen gardens. It's unusual. Your work has never brought you that far from the harem before. The air outside is sharp with the scent of mint and wet earth. You work alongside two older concubines, silent women with faces like folded parchment. They show you how to prune basil with your nails, not a knife. As you kneel among the rows of herbs, your hands deep in the soil, you feel the tension ease, not disappear, but shift. The palace politics can't quite reach this far, not with bees humming through the lavender. You return after the noon prayer to find a stewardess waiting at your chamber door. Her face is unreadable. The Valide Sultan has summoned you. You follow her without a word. This time, the walk leads not to the blue garden, not to the music room, but to the Valid's private quarters. A place few see, a place from which decisions are issued like smoke, visible but never held. Inside, the Valide is seated on a high divan beside a small brazier. A scroll lies open beside her. A teacup rests in her palm. Across from her sits Yasmin. You enter and bow. You feel the temperature of the room shift, not cold, not warm, but heavy. Remain standing, the Valide says, you do. She does not look at you yet. She is reading the scroll again, as if the words have changed since the last time she saw them. Finally, she sets it aside. There has been an accusation, she says softly. You remain still. An order, she continues, to enter the Sultan's chambers, unauthorized, delivered with your name on it. You keep your voice level. I received it. I destroyed it. Yasmin speaks, her tone light. Curious, why destroy it if it was false? You meet her gaze without blinking. Because forged ink can spread faster than the truth. And I don't collect threats. I erase them. The Valide holds up a hand. Silence falls again. I asked the calligraphy master to examine the script, she says. He tells me the style belongs to no one in the palace, but the parchment came from the harem archives, a very particular grain, used only for messages from my own stewardesses. She stands slowly. The movement alone is enough to silence even thought. I have ruled this palace for 19 years, she says. I have watched girls arrive with ambition burning in their chests like coals. Some burn out, some turn to ash, others learn to control the fire. She steps forward, standing between you and Yasmin. One of you forged that note, she says. One of you lied, and one of you thinks I cannot tell the difference. You keep your eyes lowered. Yasmin finally speaks again, softer now. I would never disobey you. The valide's voice sharpens. And yet you disobeyed silence. A beat of silence, then another. You are both dismissed, she says, but not from this room, from this conversation. For now, you bow, deeply. Yasmin hesitates, then does the same. As you leave the room, your breath is slow, controlled, but inside, your ribs feel tight. That evening, the harem ripples with unease. Everyone senses the shift, though no one says it aloud. A storm has passed through, but no one knows yet where the lightning struck. Layla finds you by the fountain just after sunset. The sky is still streaked with color, soft violets and the last of the gold. You were clever, she says quietly. You don't pretend to misunderstand. But not clever enough to stay untouched, she adds. You nod. She won't stop. No, Layla agrees. But she's already wounded herself. She moved too quickly. She thought fear would finish the work. You dip your fingers in the fountain, letting the water swirl gently. What happens now? Layla shrugs. That depends on the Valid Sultan. But you've been marked now. Not just by Yasmin, but by the rest of us. You're not invisible anymore. You glance at her. Is that a warning? It's a promise, she says. Everything gets harder from here. You believe her. The next day, you're summoned again. This time to the fragrance room, not to work, but to oversee. You are handed a small book of blends, given access to the locked shelves, told to supervise a new batch of ointments for the Valid Sultan's private supply. No one says the word promotion, but it hangs in the air like a whisper, with no breath behind it. The younger girls watch you carefully now. They mirror your movements. One copies the way you fold your hands. Another adjusts her sash to match the style of your knot. Yasmin, for now, stays away. But her silence is not defeat. It is calculation. And you keep moving. Keep mixing oils. Keep folding cloth. Keep making yourself useful, forgettable, and, paradoxically, unforgettable. Historians still argue whether power in the harem was inherited, bestowed, or stolen, whether it came from lineage or language, beauty or brains. But you've seen the truth up close now. Power in the harem is survival, sharpened to a blade, hidden in a sleeve, and it cuts both ways. The days that follow are a study in balance. You rise before dawn, as always. You dress without decoration, walk without haste, speak only when addressed. And yet, your name passes from lips more frequently now, in cautious tones from stewardesses, in clipped conversations among the older concubines, in curious murmurs from the youngest girls who have only just arrived. They don't speak to you directly, not yet, but they watch. You've become a reference point, a caution, a possibility. The fig leaf pin remains tucked in your sash. You never wear it openly. You never need to. Yasmin reappears 3 days later, just before the evening meal. She enters the dining hall with a smile so effortless it almost makes you believe it. Her robe is deep green, embroidered with gold, far too elaborate for an ordinary evening. She takes her place among the senior concubines and begins speaking softly to those nearest her, laughter trailing behind her like perfume. You don't look at her, but you can feel her testing the air again, gauging who has remained loyal, who now keeps their distance. That night, Layla finds you in the perfumery, where you are preparing small packets of powdered musk for the Valid Sultan's winter robes. She's shifting strategies, Layla says, pulling up a stool beside you. She's finished with subtlety. She's finished with pretending she isn't angry, Layla says, glancing toward the hallway. She'll try to regain favor by appearing generous, gracious, untouched by envy. You nod, folding a packet closed with care. And if that doesn't work, she'll stop smiling. The next morning, a small gathering is announced, one of the occasional performances staged in the music room for the Sultan's senior wives and favored consorts. A lute player from the imperial school is scheduled to perform. You are told to assist with preparation, arranging cushions, setting incense trays, adjusting the lanterns to cast flattering shadows. Yasmin is also assigned to help. You say nothing when you see her across the room. She does the same. But everything in the space between you is loud. Every glance, every careful gesture, every inch of movement choreographed to prove that neither of you is off balance. At one point, you both reach for the same lantern. Your fingers don't touch, but they hover close enough to feel the heat of each other's resolve. She lets you adjust it first. That is her message. I'm watching, but not striking, not yet. After the performance, you remain behind to help clear the room. A stewardess passes you a folded parchment, unsealed, not suspicious, but curious. Inside is a simple message, a line of poetry. The flower bends for no wind, and so it is plucked. There's no signature, but you know exactly who sent it. That night, you dream again. This time, you are walking through a corridor of mirrors. Each reflection shows a version of yourself. One smiling, one weeping, one older, one bruised. None of them match the woman you feel yourself becoming. When you wake, your pulse is slow. Even, you've crossed another line. There's no going back. The following day, you are summoned not by the Valide Sultan, but by a younger stewardess. A request, she says carefully, from the Crown Prince's governess. You blink. This is new. You've never been near the children's quarters. An entirely different world, even more protected than the harem itself. To be summoned there means something. Not official, not direct, but meaningful. You're asked to assist in selecting fabrics for a ceremonial garment the Crown Prince will wear during an upcoming feast. A symbolic task, the kind often used to test discretion. The governess, a tall, severe woman with the bearing of a vizier, barely glances at you when you arrive. I heard you work quickly, she says. You bow your head, and quietly. She studies you for a beat, then gestures toward a table piled with bolts of fabric. Choose two, she says. One that draws the eye, one that does not. Both must be fit for a prince. You run your fingers over the cloth. Silk, velvet, linen, wool. You select a deep navy with subtle silver threading and a softer olive green that darkens as the light moves. The governess lifts an eyebrow. Why these? The navy will show pride, you say, but not vanity. The green will suggest wisdom without overshadowing his age. She says nothing, but she takes the bolts. Later that evening, a stewardess passes you a message. This time, sealed with wax bearing the crown prince's insignia. Inside is a single line. Your choices were correct. That's all, but it's enough. News travels fast. The Valide Sultan says nothing, but you're offered fewer routine tasks the next day. A sure sign that you are being watched by more than just the harem now. Yasmin knows it too. You pass her near the courtyard before the noon prayer. She stops in front of you, adjusts her sleeve, and says with studied calm, "Be careful what doors you open. Some never close." You offer a polite smile. "Then, I'll be careful which ones I walk through." Her eyes narrow, just a little. Then she turns and walks away. Historians still argue whether power in the harem came from proximity to the sultan, or from alliances with women who never entered his chamber at all. Whether true strength was born of desire or denial. But here, among incense and whispers and lantern light, you know the truth. The most powerful woman in the harem is not the one who is chosen. It is the one who knows how to remain. The days grow shorter. Shadows stretch farther across the marble floors. The courtyard trees, once heavy with bloom, now rustle with leaves tinged gold. The season changes quietly, but you feel it in the pacing of the harem. Everything moves more deliberately now. Even whispers seem to pause and think before being spoken. And through it all, you remain steady. You spend your mornings in the perfumery, now officially listed as your assigned station. You no longer simply assist, you oversee. The younger girls bring you ingredients, and the stewardesses now ask before moving your trays. Munira watches you closely still, but no longer with doubt. Her glances are sharper now, like one artisan measuring the precision of another. Today, you're preparing a custom fragrance for the Valide Sultan's winter bedding. Clove, amber, crushed rose, a whisper of pine resin. The balance is delicate, too much warmth, and the scent becomes heavy, too little, and it disappears before it settles. While you grind the dried petals in the stone mortar, a stewardess approaches. Her expression is unreadable, calm, polite, but behind her eyes, something flickers. "The Sultan has requested your presence," she says. "Not the valide, not a stewardess, the Sultan." You pause, setting the pestle down with care. You nod once, not too fast, not slow enough to be reluctant. "Where?" "The East Pavilion." The air around you stills. That part of the palace is rarely used, reserved for quiet meetings, private audiences, moments not meant for spectacle. You wash your hands, change into a robe of soft gray, and brush a few strands of loose hair behind your ears. You pin them in place with a clasp shaped like a vine, simple, understated, but crafted from real silver. The walk through the palace feels longer than it is. Every turn, every open door feels like a threshold. The air grows cooler as you approach the east wing. You hear fewer voices, more bird song. You are led into a room lit only by high, narrow windows. The Sultan is seated on a divan covered in dark velvet, a single cup of tea beside him. He does not stand. He only gestures to a cushion nearby. You kneel, bow, wait. He speaks with a voice more tired than you expected. "I hear you've been stirring the air of my harem." You do not answer, not immediately. The tone is not unkind, but it's weighted, laced with curiosity, not accusation. "I do as I'm asked," you say quietly. He considers this, nods slightly. "You've never been summoned before." "No, my lord." "Why now?" You look up just slightly, meeting his eyes without challenge. Perhaps because I never asked to be. He laughs, a dry sound, more breath than mirth. You speak well, he says, and rarely. That's what they all say about you. He leans back, watching you now, truly watching. Not like the others, not with suspicion or strategy, but with something closer to curiosity. You're not like the others, he says. You say nothing. Let the silence carry its own answer. He studies you a moment longer. Then, I've grown tired of performances, of masks. Even the Valide plays her games in poetry now. You remain still. He gestures again. Stand. You do. Slowly. He rises as well, taller than you expected, draped in a robe of dark silk. He steps closer, but not too close. You've become a name, he says, but I don't know your voice. You meet his gaze. Would you like to? He considers this, smiles faintly. Not yet. He turns away. You may go. You bow and leave the room. Your pulse is steady. Your steps controlled. But inside, something shifts. Not fear, not pride, something else. Back in the harem, no one speaks to you as you return. But several heads turn. They know, they always know. That evening, the Valide Sultan sends for you. She doesn't ask what happened. She doesn't need to. Instead, she offers you a cushion, a cup of warm milk, and a single line. Be careful what he forgets, and what he remembers. You nod. Yes, my lady. She sets the cup down. Yasmin will not take this well. I'm aware. She may move quickly now. That makes her dangerous. You sip slowly, or reckless. The Valide watches you for a long moment, then, with the smallest of smiles, says, perhaps both. 2 days pass in stillness. The harem watches. Whispers curl through the corridors like incense smoke, slow to rise, slow to fade. Then it happens. The night of the winter feast. Yasmin makes her move. It begins with an announcement. She has been selected to serve the Sultan's final course, a duty reserved only for those in favor. She wears a robe of deep plum, lined with silver threading, and a necklace that once belonged to the Valide herself. A gift, she says. She walks through the corridor like a queen already crowned. But the Valide Sultan doesn't watch her. She watches you, and you simply wait, because you already know. The wine she carries will not make it to the Sultan. The stewardesses have been instructed. The tray will be intercepted. The robe will be recalled as mistakenly worn. The necklace will be quietly retrieved. And when Yasmin returns to the harem, hours later, her face pale and her hands empty. No one says a word. The next morning, she is reassigned to the lower kitchens. A temporary placement, they say. But everyone knows better. She does not look at you as she passes. You do not look at her. Historians still argue whether the fall of a favorite was always dramatic, public, definitive. Whether it came with shouting and exile or simply a shift in corridor traffic. But in the harem, you now understand, power rarely breaks. It recedes, quietly, and you never see it leave. After Yasmin is gone, the harem does not rejoice. It exhales. There is no celebration, no overt shift in protocol, no rearrangement of cushions or titles. Her name is not scratched from walls, her scent not scrubbed from the fabrics she once wore. She simply stops being mentioned. And that, in the harem, is the loudest kind of ending. You are not offered her chamber. You do not receive her silks or her status. Instead, You are left exactly where you've always been, which is how you know your place has changed. Silence now follows you with respect. Whispers now end when you approach. The younger concubines no longer avoid your gaze. They meet it carefully, openly, as if asking silent permission to learn. And the Valid Sultan, though she does not call you often, begins to send word more frequently. A question about fabrics, a request for your opinion on timing, a quiet nod passed through a stewardess when her eyes meet yours across a prayer gathering. You are not rising in a blaze. You are settling into permanence. Today, the fragrance room feels warmer than usual. You've asked the girls to steep crush myrrh into the base oil, preparing for the long winter weeks ahead. The scent that curls through the air is darker, richer, a weightier kind of comfort. One of the youngest girls, barely past 15, fumbles a vial of neroli and nearly sends it tumbling to the floor. You catch it just in time, fingers steady, voice calm. Slowly, you tell her, "It's not about speed, it's about attention." She nods, cheeks flushed, and returns to her work. Munira watches from the corner. She doesn't interfere. She hasn't for some time now. Her presence lingers more like a tradition than a supervisor. At midday, you are summoned again. But this time, it's not from the Valid Sultan. It's from the Crown Prince's governess. She greets you in a smaller, less ornate sitting room near the children's quarters. There is no ceremony, no guards, only a scroll laid open on the table and a tray of figs untouched beside it. "I'm told the Sultan is pleased with your decisions," she says, eyes not leaving the scroll. You bow slightly. "I'm grateful to hear that." She finally looks up. "Gratitude is dangerous here, if it isn't rooted in foresight." "I understand. I believe you do." She closes the scroll and slides it toward you. "You'll review the menu for the coming ceremony. The Sultan wants his guests reminded of his lineage. That requires symbolism. You'll help the kitchens make those choices." You don't flinch, though the weight of the task is clear. Food, in court ceremonies, is never just nourishment. It's a message plated and garnished. "I'll begin this evening." The governess gives a single nod. Discretion matters more than taste. You leave with the scroll folded in your sash, aware that this is not a promotion, not officially, it is a test. Another quiet gate, barely open, daring you to walk through without asking permission. Back in your chamber, you study the list: stewed quince, lamb with pomegranate, almond pastries shaped like birds, all symbolic, all familiar. But which story does the Sultan want told? Strength, sophistication, nostalgia? You decide slowly, carefully, choosing dishes not for their flavor, but for the emotions they evoke, the empire's golden past, the stability of the present, the ambitions yet unnamed. When you deliver your final notes, the head cook nods in silence. No compliments, no objections. That night, you light your oil lamp early. The shadows on the wall stretch longer than usual, curling across the tile like script you haven't yet learned how to read. Layla visits after prayer. She carries no lamp of her own, just a small bowl of warm milk and a tired smile. "Do you ever miss the days when no one knew your name?" she asks, settling onto the floor. You pause. Then, "Sometimes, but I've learned something." She tilts her head. "It's not the knowing that's dangerous," you say. "It's how they say it." Layla nods. "And how they remember it." You share the milk in silence, warmth rising between your hands as the night deepens. In the coming days, preparations for the ceremony increase. You are pulled into meetings with the seamstresses, the candle makers, even the musicians, always briefly, always indirectly, but always deliberately. And yet, you remain outwardly unchanged. You keep your voice soft. You bow where expected. You speak only when needed. You let them imagine you are merely efficient. Because you know now that the most powerful women in the harem are not those who rule openly. They are the ones who learn when to let power look like service. Historians still debate how influence flowed through the palace, whether it trickled down from the throne or rose quietly from the footstools, whether decisions were forged in public chambers or in the shade of private gardens. But you know the truth because you have lived it. The real decisions begin before the first word is spoken, in the look, the silence, the gesture no one was meant to see. And those who learn to read that language, they are never forgotten. The day of the ceremony arrives with silver in the sky. Rain has washed the palace clean overnight, leaving the marble slick and shining under a pale, overcast light. Even the air smells different, damp, sharp, and expectant. As if the palace itself knows it must perform. You rise early, as always, but this morning, you move slower, not from hesitation, only intention. Your robe is pale ivory, unadorned except for a single line of embroidery at the collar, a gift from the Valid Sultan's seamstress, quietly left, folded on your cushion the night before. You tie your sash carefully, hiding the fig leaf pin beneath the final fold. When you step into the hall, the harem is already in motion. Concubines and attendants float between chambers, adjusting veils, arranging trays, reciting instructions handed down through layers of whispers. The scent of polished wood, beeswax, and rose oil thickens in the air. Layla crosses your path near the perfumery. She doesn't speak, just touches your arm, briefly, as she passes. You nod in return. The gesture is enough. Your task today is quiet, but crucial, to oversee the final staging of the ceremonial table, the one placed at the very center of the reception room, visible to all who attend. The smallest imbalance, the slightest error, will be seen. You arrive early and alone. The space is already half lit with high windows and soft lanterns. The table is long, curved like a crescent moon, covered in ivory silk. You begin placing the dishes yourself, just as you planned. Each one carries meaning. The lamb with pomegranate to suggest power rooted in tradition. The almond pastries to honor the Sultan's childhood. The quince compote with saffron to symbolize prosperity through patience. When the chief stewardess enters and finds you still adjusting the last bowl of candied orange peel, she doesn't interrupt, she watches, then simply says, "It's perfect." But that is not your cue to relax. Later, you are asked to wait in a chamber adjacent to the reception hall, not with the senior concubines, not with the seamstresses, alone. You sit by a window, watching the rain return in thin threads. Across the stone path, you see a string of guests begin to arrive. Diplomats, generals, scholars, high wives of viziers. Their robes gleam in the rain like lacquered wood. And then, the Sultan. His pace is measured, but confident. He says little to those who bow to him. He walks straight to the main room. You hear nothing, just footsteps, just the slight hush of fabric and breath. The feast begins. You are not summoned, not directly involved, but your absence is not neglect. It's deliberate, a space left empty for a reason, and in that space, your name echoes. After the meal, long after the final fruit has been cleared and the musicians have begun playing a piece slow enough to lull the powerful into pleasant conversation, a stewardess approaches. The Valid Sultan requests your company, she says. You follow her through a corridor dim with candlelight to the same private receiving room where you first served tea in silence. Inside, the Valid is standing. She wears no crown, no jewels, only a robe of black silk with gold threading at the cuffs. She does not offer you a seat. She does not need to. The Sultan was pleased, she says simply. You bow your head. He noted the food more than once, and he asked who arranged it. A pause. I gave no name. You raise your eyes. Why not? Because names are for those who need credit. You, she says, have earned something better. She steps closer. You will remain in the perfumery, officially, but you'll begin meeting with the stewardesses, listening, observing. You nod. And then, when the time comes, she replies, you'll advise me directly, but not in public, not in court, not even in the garden. Her voice drops. When I speak, she says, you will be behind my words. You feel the weight of that, heavier than any robe or title. I understand. She smiles, faint, almost invisible, but it's real. You do. That night, you return to your chamber. Outside, the rain has stopped. The stones glisten under moonlight, and somewhere near the laundry courtyard, you hear someone humming softly. You sit by your lamp, but do not light it. You let the dark settle around you. You remember everything. The first morning in the bathhouse, the cut finger over silk, the forged note, the stolen glances, the lessons whispered beneath fig trees. You remember Layla's warning that everything gets harder from here. And she was right. But you are no longer someone who avoids difficulty. You are someone who walks directly into it, cloak folded, voice steady. Historians will never know your name. You were not a favorite, not a consort, not a queen. But in rooms behind the rooms, in words that were never spoken aloud, in scrolls that bore no signature, you left your mark. Because in the Ottoman harem, there were two kinds of power, the kind that glittered in sunlight and the kind that shaped the walls behind it. And you became the second kind. And now, the halls grow quiet again. The lanterns are dimmed. The scent of clove and rose lingers just faintly on the breeze that slips beneath the curtain. You sit in your chamber, still dressed in silk, but your hands are finally still. No scrolls to review, no perfumes to mix, no steps to measure, just quiet. The palace continues, of course. It always does. The walls hold more secrets than anyone could count, and behind every door, another story waits. But yours, for now, has been written. You have walked the long corridors of the Ottoman harem. You have learned to speak without sound, to move without being seen, to choose silence not from fear, but from strength. And now, you can rest. Let the marble floors cool beneath your feet. Let the golden lattice work cast slow shadows across your dreams. Outside, the rain has stopped. The courtyard is still. The sky is soft with the first light of dawn, and somewhere in the distance, a dove coos, low and steady, like a lullaby you almost remember. So close your eyes, let the story fade, and know that even in the forgotten corners of history, there are quiet triumphs like yours, tucked gently between the folds of time. End of script. Sweet dreams.